My name is Cindy Harlow, and I am 28 years old. I was sitting across from my boyfriend of 2 years when he leaned in and said the words that ended us before his ex even arrived. Don't embarrass me in front of my ex. He wasn't there yet, and that was the part that made it worse, because it meant the warning wasn't about something that happened. It was about what he expected from me the moment she walked in. We were at the bar he'd chosen, the one he called neutral ground, for the coffee that had somehow become drinks. He'd insisted I come along, proof everything was innocent, he said, nothing to hide. But watching him check his reflection in the darkened window for the third time, adjusting his collar in the glass like it was a mirror, I understood exactly what my job was tonight. I wasn't his girlfriend in the way a girlfriend is supposed to be cherished. I was his prop, his evidence, the safe display case he could point to and say, "Look." I moved on, while still making sure his ex never had to feel the sting of it. He kept glancing at the door like he was waiting for the room to change temperature. His phone was on the table, face up, lighting every few seconds. Each time it buzzed, he'd check it fast, type a response faster, and smile at the screen like the conversation there mattered more than the one happening in front of him. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, that adults can stay friends with exes, that maturity is quiet. But his energy wasn't quiet, it was rehearsed. I finished my drink slowly. The ice clinked against the glass when I set it down, and I remember thinking how small that sound was compared to what was about to happen. I stood up. He blinked like he didn't understand the script had changed. "Where are you going?" I didn't answer. I walked out while he was mid-sentence, his voice rising behind me in confusion, then irritation, like he couldn't believe I would step out of the role he assigned. The bartender glanced up as I passed, and I left a 20 on the bar top without thinking. Outside, the air was cooler, and the parking lot lights made everything look more honest than the bar ever did. I got in my car, started the engine, and sat there for a moment with my hands steady on the wheel. I wasn't angry. I was clear. Clarity feels almost peaceful when you've spent too long negotiating your own worth. I pulled out my phone and opened the property management portal. The lease renewal deadline was tonight at midnight, and I knew that because he'd reminded me twice this week, casually, like it was just another adult task I handled. One decision, one click, the kind of power you don't think about until you need it. I logged in, watched the dashboard load, and stared at the renewal options with the calm focus of someone finally seeing the leverage she forgot she had. Decline to renew. Submit. The confirmation screen loaded, bright and official. Submission received, 8:47 p.m. The landlord's automated system would process it within the hour, cold and indifferent, and he would get the email whether he was ready or not. I switched to messages and typed 4 words, the way you close a door without slamming it. No scene, just an ending. Send. Then I put the phone down like I'd set down something heavy I'd been carrying for too long. I drove home to start packing my things, and on the way, the quiet in my car felt louder than any fight we never had. But there had been scenes before that night. I just hadn't been watching closely enough. Or maybe I'd been watching and choosing denial, because denial is easier than admitting you're not being loved the way you thought you were. We met 2 years ago at my friend Josh's housewarming party. He was funny, sharp, easy to talk to, the kind of guy who could make you feel like you were the only person in the room. We started dating a week later, and everything moved naturally. Dinners, weekend trips, meeting each other's friends, building routines that felt like a life. At the 1-year mark, he suggested moving in together because his lease was ending and mine was month to month, and it made sense, at least on paper, the way things always do before reality shows up. We found a place in a decent neighborhood, a 2-bedroom apartment with covered parking and a 10-minute walk to his office. The application required a primary tenant, and my credit score was higher, my income more stable, so the lease went in my name. He was listed as an additional resident. I didn't think much of it then. Just paperwork, just a formality, the kind of detail you file away because you don't think you'll ever need it. Rent was $1,800 a month. We agreed I'd cover the larger share since I made more. I paid $1,260. He contributed $540. A 70-30 split, fair enough. I also covered the security deposit, the furniture, the first round of utilities. He handled decorating, planned our social calendar, kept the place feeling like a home instead of just an apartment, and for a while it felt balanced. I provided stability. He provided warmth. It felt like partnership. The first mention of his ex came about 6 months after we moved in. casual over breakfast one Saturday, like he was talking about a coworker he ran into. I ran into Marissa yesterday, he said, scrolling through his phone. We grabbed coffee, just catching up. Marissa, his ex-girlfriend from college, he explained, in town for work now. I nodded. It didn't seem like a big deal. People stay friendly with exes. Adults can handle that. I wanted to be the adult. Over the next few months, her name appeared more often, always wrapped in reassurance. Marissa is going through a rough breakup. Marissa asked about good therapists in the area. Marissa remembered my birthday and sent something to his office. Each mention came with the same soft finish. Don't worry. It's completely platonic. She's like a sister to me. We only dated for like 6 months back then. I believed him because I loved him, and because the version of him I fell for sounded honest when he spoke. 2 weeks before the bar incident, he brought it up again while we were making dinner. He was chopping vegetables. I was stirring pasta sauce. Marissa is coming to town next week, he said without looking up. There's a tech conference downtown. She asked if I wanted to meet up. I said sure, we could all grab dinner one night, because that's what secure people say when they trust the person they're with. He hesitated, just a second, barely noticeable, then said maybe he might want to catch up solo one evening, talk through some personal stuff she was dealing with. The word solo should have been a flag. I let it pass anyway. 3 days later, he told me she suggested drinks instead of coffee, more relaxed atmosphere, he said. Then he asked if it would be okay with me if I came. The phrasing was perfect, like he was handing me the decision so he could call me unreasonable if I didn't like it. If I said I was uncomfortable, I'd be the insecure girlfriend, the one who couldn't handle her boyfriend having female friends. So I said I was fine with it. He smiled, kissed my cheek, and told me I was the best. But something in his smile felt too bright, too relieved, like he'd just gotten permission to do exactly what he wanted. The invitation came on a Tuesday, casual as ordering takeout. She's free Thursday, he said, looking up from his phone with that same bright tone. Wants to grab drinks. You should come. He named the bar on Fifth Avenue, the one with the good cocktails, neutral ground, public, well lit, a place where nothing inappropriate could happen. He said it like a shield. I said sounds good, because I still hadn't accepted what my gut was already trying to tell me. Wednesday evening, I found him standing in front of the closet with half his wardrobe spread across the bed, like he was preparing for a stage. He tried on outfits he never wore with me, swapped shirts twice, fixed his hair, checked himself from different angles. I asked if it mattered because it was just drinks with his ex. He laughed, but it came out forced, and he said he just wanted to look put together, professional, like his life was going well. That line stayed with me, like he wasn't trying to show her he was happy. He was trying to prove something. Thursday arrived. I got home at 5:30, and he was in the bathroom, grooming products spread across the counter, hairstyled more carefully than usual. I'd seen him get ready for work events, for weddings, for important dinners, but this felt different, more intentional. In the car, he checked his reflection at every red light, adjusted his hair, and smiled at messages that weren't from me. I offered that maybe she was bringing someone, a coworker or friend, to keep it casual. He said no. She was coming solo. She needed to vent. She was going through a tough time, and he said it like that explanation should erase every tension I felt. We arrived at 7:15, 15 minutes early, because he insisted we shouldn't keep her waiting. Inside, the place was half full. Dim lighting, exposed brick, a long mahogany bar with leather stools. He scanned the room, didn't see her yet, and led us to a booth near the window, the one with the best light. He slid in, checked his reflection in the window glass one more time, adjusted his necklace like it mattered, and set his phone down, face up like he was waiting for a signal. The waitress came over. I ordered a beer. He ordered a drink he usually saved for special occasions, and when I pointed that out, he laughed it off, waving a hand like I was imagining patterns that weren't there. But I knew his patterns. I knew what he did when something mattered. The bartender walked past and nodded at him like he recognized him. "Date night?" he asked with a smile. My boyfriend didn't correct him. He smiled back and said, "Something like that," and I felt my stomach drop because even strangers could see the performance happening. His phone lit up again. "She's 5 minutes away," he said, then leaned across the table and lowered his voice, serious now, like he was giving me instructions before a meeting. "Just be cool tonight, okay?" I asked what that meant. He said, "Don't make it weird. Keep it light, casual, don't overdo the girlfriend thing. I stared at him. The girlfriend thing. Then he said it, quiet and sharp, like it was reasonable. Just don't embarrass me in front of my ex. I looked at him, really looked, and the whole night snapped into place. The outfit changes, the early arrival, the special occasion drink, the window light, the constant phone checks. I finished my drink, set the glass down, stood up, and left without giving him the scene he secretly wanted. I drove home after I left the bar, and the strangest part was how calm my body felt. Not numb, not dissociated, just settled, like it had been waiting for my mind to finally accept what it already knew. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't scream. I didn't even grip the steering wheel too tight. I just drove, headlights cutting through the dark, and let the truth sit beside me like a passenger who had been trying to get my attention for months. When I got to our apartment complex, I parked in my covered spot and walked upstairs with the same quiet focus I use at work when something is urgent and I don't have time for emotion. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and the place smelled like the candle he always lit when he wanted the apartment to feel warm and safe. It hit me then how much of our life was staging. The right lighting, the right scent, the right tone. Safety as a performance, not a practice. I went straight to the bedroom and pulled my suitcase from the closet. Not the big one, the medium one, the one that fits enough clothes to be gone for a while without looking like a dramatic exit. I started folding things neatly, not because I wanted to be kind, but because neatness kept my mind steady. A t-shirt, jeans, a sweater, socks rolled, toiletries bag, charger. As I packed, my brain kept replaying his words, "Don't embarrass me in front of my ex," and the way he said it like my existence was a liability. I kept thinking about the moment he called me the girlfriend thing. Like being his girlfriend was a costume I could dial down for a night so he could feel comfortable in front of the woman who once had him. I didn't know what hurt more, the disrespect or the assumption that I would accept it quietly, that I would shrink because he asked. Maybe that's why I didn't cry, because my tears were what he expected. My silence wasn't. On the kitchen counter, the mail was stacked the way I always stacked it. Utilities, grocery coupons, a flyer for a local festival. I walked past it and went to the desk in the corner of the living room where we kept shared paperwork because I needed to see reality in ink. I pulled out the lease copy we printed when we first moved in, the one I'd shoved into a folder without reading twice. I already knew what I would find, but seeing it still felt like a door opening. Primary tenant, my name. Additional resident, his name. The detail that didn't matter when you're in love becomes everything when you realize someone has been living in your life like a guest. We met at Josh's housewarming party, and for a long time I told myself that story like it was proof of destiny. Josh had that tiny backyard full of string lights and paper plates, and a playlist too loud for real conversation, so everyone talked closer than usual and pretended it was just the music. My boyfriend, Ethan, stood by the cooler telling a story that made 3 different people laugh at once. He had that magnetic thing, the ability to make you feel included without trying. When he looked at me, it felt like the room narrowed, like the night suddenly had a point. We started dating a week later, and it didn't feel rushed. It felt natural. Dinner after work, weekend trips, meeting friends, the kind of routine that builds without you realizing it's becoming your life. He wasn't cruel in the beginning. He wasn't dismissive. He was attentive, affectionate, the kind of man who remembered small details and made you feel chosen. He'd open doors, text to check in, plan little surprises, and I loved him for it because I wanted that kind of steady warmth after years of dating men who treated effort like weakness. When he suggested moving in together at the 1-year mark, it felt like the next step we were supposed to take. His lease was ending. Mine was month to month. We were spending most nights together anyway. We talked it through like responsible adults, like 2 people building a shared life. We found the apartment in that decent neighborhood near his office, and I remember how excited he was walking through it, pointing out where he'd put plants, where we could hang art, how the second bedroom could be an office or a guest room. I remember feeling proud, like we were doing something real. The lease ended up in my name because my credit was stronger and my income was more stable. It wasn't a power move. It was practical. It made the application smoother, and he joked that I was the grown-up between us, like it was cute. Rent was $1,800, and we agreed on a 70-30 split because I made more. I paid $1,260. He paid $540. I covered the security deposit, the furniture and utilities setup. He decorated, built the vibe, planned the social calendar, made the place feel like home instead of a sterile space. It worked. It felt balanced. I provided stability. He provided warmth. For a while, I didn't notice how that dynamic could turn into a trap, where one person is always building and the other is always being built around. The first time he mentioned Marissa, it was casual, almost careless. 6 months after we moved in, over breakfast, he said he ran into her and they grabbed coffee. Marissa, his ex-girlfriend from college, in town for work now. I nodded because I didn't want to be the kind of woman who panics at an old name. People can stay friends with exes. Adults can handle that. He offered reassurance before I even asked. Completely platonic. Like a sister. We only dated 6 months. He made it sound small, harmless, something that didn't deserve a second thought. And I wanted to believe him, because believing him meant I didn't have to question the life we'd built. But over time, her name started appearing more often, and each mention came with a little explanation, a little justification, like he was managing my reaction before I had one. Marissa is going through a rough breakup. Marissa asked about therapists. Marissa remembered his birthday and sent something to his office. Each story was wrapped in the same bow. Don't worry, it's nothing weird. And I kept accepting it because I didn't want to be unreasonable. I didn't want to be insecure. I didn't want to be the girlfriend who makes rules. 2 weeks before the bar, he brought her up again while we were making dinner. And I can still see it clearly because the moment was so normal it felt safe. He was chopping vegetables. I was stirring sauce. He said she was coming to town for a tech conference and asked if he wanted to meet up. I said sure, we could all grab dinner, because that's what a healthy relationship looks like, right? He hesitated, just a flicker, then suggested he might want to catch up solo one evening because she needed to talk through personal stuff. He said it like he was being compassionate. The word solo slid into the room like smoke, and I let it pass because I wanted to trust him more than I wanted to trust my own discomfort. 3 days later, he said she suggested drinks instead of coffee, more relaxed atmosphere. Then he asked if I'd be okay with me going. The phrasing was smooth, strategic. He was giving me a choice, but it wasn't a real choice. If I said no, I'd be the jealous girlfriend. If I said yes, he'd get what he wanted and call it trust. I said I was fine with it, and he smiled, kissed my cheek, told me I was the best. But the smile felt too relieved, like he'd been waiting for permission. The invitation came on Tuesday. He said she was free Thursday and wanted to grab drinks and that I should come. That part is what I clung to, because I told myself he wouldn't invite me if there was something to hide. He named the bar on 5th Avenue, the one with good cocktails, neutral ground, public, well-lit, safe. He said it like a shield. I agreed, and he texted back fast, thumbs moving like he'd been waiting for that moment. Wednesday night, I found him standing in front of the closet with half his wardrobe on the bed, trying on outfits like he was preparing for something important. He laughed when I asked if it mattered, said he just wanted to look put together, professional, like his life was going well. That line stayed with me, like his life was going well, not like he was happy with me, not like he was content, but like he needed her to see him a certain way. He chose a shirt he usually saved for date nights with me, the one that made his shoulders look broader. I suggested the sweater he wore on our first date, the one that made him look comfortable and real. He glanced at it and shook his head. Too casual. Thursday, he got ready like it was an event. He changed his shirt twice, fixed his hair 3 times, checked his reflection at every red light. His phone buzzed. He smiled at the screen, and I felt myself becoming quieter, watching more, speaking less, because something in me was trying to gather evidence before my heart tried to deny it. At the bar, he chose the booth by the window because the lighting hit his face better. He ordered a drink he usually saved for celebrations and waved off my comment about it like I was being silly. The bartender assumed it was date night, and Ethan didn't correct him, just smiled and said something like that. Then he leaned in and told me not to overdo the girlfriend thing. Then he told me not to embarrass him in front of his ex. And in that moment, the entire last 6 months rearranged itself into a pattern I couldn't unsee. So when I left the bar and declined the lease renewal, it wasn't impulsive. It was the first time I acted on what I had been absorbing for months. I wasn't punishing him. I was removing myself from a situation where my role was to be convenient, silent, and useful. I finished packing my suitcase, zipped it, and set it by the door. Then I sat on the couch and waited, because I knew the email would land soon, and I wanted to see what he did when consequences showed up without my permission. At 9:19 p.m., my phone started ringing. At 9:19 p.m., my phone started ringing. His name lit up the screen, the photo I once loved suddenly looking unfamiliar. I let it ring. 10 seconds later, a voicemail notification appeared. I played it on speaker, listening to his voice wobble between confusion and forced calm. He said he'd gotten a strange email from the landlord about move-out dates and asked me to call him back. I deleted the voicemail, not out of spite, out of clarity. I didn't owe him comfort anymore. Another call came in at 9:31, this one sharper. He said it wasn't funny and demanded I explain what I was doing. Deleted. At 9:48, the tone shifted again, anger flaring. He said I was being insane, that I was overreacting, that I hadn't even done anything. Deleted. By 10:12, the call came with panic. He said I couldn't just kick him out, that he'd been paying rent for a year and a half, that he'd call the landlord and a lawyer. Deleted. At 10:41, his voice cracked into tears, asking me to talk, saying we could fix it, saying he didn't understand what he'd done. Deleted. The pattern was familiar. Anger, blame, panic, pleading. I'd seen it before in smaller moments. This time I let it play out without stepping in. I didn't go back to the apartment right away. I drove to the 24-hour diner 6 blocks away, the one with buzzing fluorescent lights and cracked vinyl booths. I ordered coffee I wouldn't drink and slid into a corner booth with my laptop. When emotions get loud, numbers get honest. I needed honesty. First stop was the shared expense account. Groceries, utilities, household supplies, equal access, equal responsibility. That was the agreement. I scrolled back through months of transactions, letting the rhythm of deposits and withdrawals tell the story. January, February, March, April. Then I saw it. February 14th, $150 sent to Marissa Lane. Note, emergency. March 3rd, $200 sent to Marissa Lane. Note, help with moving. April 19th, $300 sent to Marissa Lane. Note, loan payback later. 3 transfers, $650. All from the joint account I funded with $400 every month for shared costs. Money meant for groceries, utilities, toilet paper. I took screenshots of each transaction and saved them to a folder on my desktop labeled Receipts. I didn't feel rage. I felt confirmation, the kind that settles in your bones. Next, I opened the property management portal again. I clicked into the lease agreement and read it carefully this time. Primary tenant, my full legal name. Additional resident, his full legal name. No lease obligation. No tenant rights beyond what I granted. I read it twice, then a third time, because details matter when someone is about to claim you ruined their life. The renewal section glowed at the top of the page, now marked submitted. Declined. Vacate in 60 days. Timestamp 8:47 p.m. It felt final in a way arguments never do. I clicked into payment history. 18 months of records loaded. Every month, $1,800 withdrawn from my checking account on the 1st, on time, no exceptions. Then a separate column labeled Additional Resident Contributions. His deposits, $540 each month. Consistent, 70-30, exactly as we'd agreed. I opened a blank document and did the math anyway. My total, $22,680. His total, $9,720. The difference sat there, unarguable. Stability costs more than warmth, and I'd been paying the premium. I opened a new tab and searched studio apartments in our area. The cheapest was $950 a month. Average was closer to $1,100. He made $48,000 a year. After taxes, roughly $3,200 a month. Rent at $1,100 would be tight but possible. What wasn't possible was the move-in, first month, last month, security deposit, utilities, minimum $4,000 up front. I checked the balance of our shared account, $847. That's when it clicked fully. He hadn't just been living with me, he'd been living through me. I closed the laptop, opened it again, and went back to the portal confirmation. The screen didn't care about his feelings. Submitted. Approved. I paid my bill at the counter and walked back to my car, the night air cooler than before. At 11:07 p.m., I pulled into the apartment complex and parked in my covered spot. From the car, I could see the lights on in the unit. He was home. He must have left the bar in a hurry. I wondered if Marissa had watched his face collapse when the email came in. I wondered if she stayed. I wondered if that mattered. I went upstairs and unlocked the door. He was pacing the living room, phone pressed to his ear, mascara streaked under his eyes, voice raised. When he saw me, he hung up. He demanded to know what the hell this was. I told him calmly that the lease renewal had been declined. He said he'd paid rent. I told him he was an additional resident. He said it was illegal. I told him to read the lease. He said I was cruel. I told him I was done shrinking. He said I was throwing away 2 years. I told him I was reclaiming my future. He stood there, stunned, because he'd never imagined a world where I didn't explain myself into staying. By Friday morning, my phone was full of messages from mutual friends. He'd gotten ahead of the story. He said I abandoned him, that I blindsided him, that I threw him out over nothing. I didn't respond right away. I organized files, screenshots, PDFs, timelines. Then I opened the group chat with the people who mattered most, the ones who'd known us from the beginning. I sent one message. Here are the receipts. I attached the payment ledger, the lease page with names highlighted, the renewal confirmation, and the transaction history to Marissa. The chat went quiet. Then the questions came. Then the realization. One friend said they were at the bar that night and saw the whole thing. She said he was waiting for his ex, checking his phone, fixing his appearance, and when I left, he barely noticed until the email hit his screen. She said Marissa showed up 5 minutes later, hugged him too long, ordered drinks, then watched him unravel when his phone kept buzzing. She said Marissa left after 10 minutes, uncomfortable, because she hadn't expected consequences to show up so fast. The narrative flipped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just decisively. By Saturday afternoon, his public post disappeared. A bartender commented on one before it vanished, confirming what he'd asked me not to do. Screenshots spread. His panic escalated into threats that went nowhere. Property management confirmed the lease terms in writing. 60 days. No exceptions. No tenant rights. No scene. No. By Sunday night, his last message came through, cold and formal, saying his lawyer told him he had rights. I forwarded it to the property management office. Monday morning, their legal department replied, confirming everything I already knew. I sent the email to him with no commentary. Silence followed, the kind that happens when someone finally understands the floor they were standing on belonged to someone else all along. I zipped my suitcase, loaded it into my car, and drove to my friend's place for the night. The city lights blurred past, and for the first time since I left the bar, I let myself breathe fully. I hadn't embarrassed him in front of his ex. I'd embarrassed the lie he was living in, and that was never my responsibility to protect. By Saturday afternoon, his version of the story was everywhere except where it could survive contact with facts. Mutual friends forwarded screenshots without commentary, letting the captions speak for themselves. Posts about being blindsided, about being discarded, about how love can disappear overnight when someone shows their true colors. He framed it like a betrayal that came out of nowhere. Like I woke up one morning and decided to be cruel for sport. He didn't mention the bar. He didn't mention the warning. He didn't mention the money. Omission was his favorite tool. I didn't argue in comments. I didn't defend myself publicly. I did what I've always done when something mattered. I organized. I labeled. I waited. Truth doesn't need volume when it has structure. The group chat with our core friends stayed quiet for hours after I sent the receipts. Then the questions started, careful at first, then sharper. How long had the money transfers been happening? Why was the lease only in my name? Why did he tell everyone it was 50-50? Each answer came with a screenshot, a timestamp, a clean line connecting action to consequence. The tone shifted from confusion to disbelief to something heavier. Recognition. One friend admitted that they were at the bar that night, sitting 2 tables over. They said they watched him check his phone every minute, watched him adjust his shirt collar like he was preparing for an interview, watched him lean in and say something serious to me before I stood up and left. They said after I walked out, he looked surprised for about 3 seconds, then went back to his phone. 5 minutes later, Marissa arrived. They hugged longer than expected. They ordered drinks. Then his phone buzzed again, and his face collapsed in on itself. Panic right there at the table. The friend said Marissa tried to calm him down, but whatever she'd expected from that night, it wasn't consequences. She left 10 minutes later, awkward and fast, like she wanted distance from the mess he'd made. That detail mattered more than I expected. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed something I'd already accepted. I wasn't leaving a man who was confused. I was leaving a man who believed I would always absorb the cost of his comfort. By Sunday morning, the public post disappeared. Not one dramatic deletion, but piece by piece, like someone realizing too late that the internet remembers better than people do. A bartender from the bar commented on one before it vanished, saying he heard the request clearly and saw the X show up right after. That comment spread quietly, screenshotted and shared in private messages, the way truth does when it doesn't need applause. He tried a different angle next. Late-night texts, formal and stiff, claiming he had tenant rights, claiming the non-renewal was illegal, claiming his lawyer said I couldn't do this. I forwarded the message to property management without adding a word. Their legal department responded the next morning, confirming in writing that additional residents hold no tenant rights beyond what the primary tenant grants, that the 60-day notice satisfied all requirements, and that the move-out date stood. I sent him the email. No commentary, no explanation. Silence after that, the kind that settles when someone finally runs out of leverage. Over the next 2 weeks, his scramble became visible through secondhand updates I didn't ask for. Applications denied without a cosigner. Apartments too far from work. Studios smaller than he imagined himself in. Marissa offered emotional support, but no money. When he floated the idea of moving in together, she said she wasn't ready to live with anyone. The safety net he thought he had turned out to be air. I closed the joint account and transferred the remaining balance to my personal savings. While reviewing the history, I noticed withdrawals I'd never questioned before. Small amounts, $100 here, $150 there. Over a year, nearly $3,000 gone from the travel fund I'd been building for both of us. I closed the account without ceremony. I sold the furniture we picked out together, the couch, the dining table, the dresser that didn't fit anywhere else. $1,200 in cash. Clean break. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment downtown, 10th floor, corner unit, floor-to-ceiling windows. It cost $1,100 a month, less than my share of the old place. Better building, better light, better life. I set up automatic transfers into a new high-yield savings account, $700 a month. I named it Freedom Fund because calling things what they are makes them real. The last message from him came late on a Tuesday, weeks after the move-out date. It was softer, regret-shaped, full of apologies that arrived only after inconvenience did its work. He said he'd been confused. He said he missed our life. He said he saw clearly now. I read it twice, then replied once, carefully, and blocked him. Our life was you living on my stability while auditioning for your ex. That's not a life to miss. Take care. That night, I sat on my balcony and watched the city light up, one window at a time. The Freedom Fund balance glowed on my phone, enough for a trip I'd been postponing for years. I booked it without hesitation. Confirmation saved to a folder labeled New Chapters. No scene. Just an ending that finally made space for something honest. The shift didn't happen all at once. It happened in fragments, through other people's voices, through updates I never asked for, but somehow always received. Someone mentioned he was crashing on a friend's couch for a week because the move-out date came faster than he expected. Someone else said he'd applied to 3 studios and been denied because his income didn't meet the ratio without a cosigner. Someone quietly added that he'd asked his parents for help and been told no, not because they didn't love him, but because they were tired of rescuing him from decisions he refused to own. Marissa stayed in this picture just long enough to prove a point. She offered moral support, texts, long calls late at night, the kind of attention that feels like care until money enters the conversation. When he hinted about living together, framed it like a temporary thing until he got back on his feet, she pulled back. She said she wasn't ready to live with anyone. She said she needed space. She said she couldn't handle that kind of responsibility right now. The same words he'd used on me in different contexts, now reflected back at him without softness. By the time he finally found a place, the options were thin. A studio 40 minutes by bus from his office. Street parking instead of covered. Shared laundry in the basement. One narrow window that faced a brick wall. Rent $950. Move-in costs scraped together from savings, borrowed favors, and a credit card he'd sworn he wouldn't touch again. When he moved in, someone sent me a photo without asking if I wanted to see it. An air mattress on the floor, a single lamp in the corner, boxes stacked against the wall because there was nowhere else to put them. His social media caption read, "New beginnings, starting over, building something better," with a little seedling emoji, like optimism, could replace structure. The comments were supportive. "Proud of you. Fresh starts are beautiful. You've got this." But the forced positivity couldn't hide the reality underneath. The distance, the downgrade, the cost of living without someone quietly holding everything together in the background. Anna filled in the details later, not cruelly, just honestly. She said he cried a lot, that he couldn't believe this was his life now, that he kept saying he never thought I'd actually leave, like that was the real betrayal, not what pushed me there. Meanwhile, my life kept getting quieter in the best way. I unpacked boxes in my new apartment and realized there was nothing here I didn't choose. No compromised furniture, no shared clutter, just clean lines and light. I sold the last of the things I didn't want and watched the Freedom Fund grow. $4,347 after 6 weeks. Saved rent, canceled subscriptions, furniture sales. I started seeing numbers as proof, not punishment. One afternoon at my desk, I opened my banking app and scrolled through the transactions like I was reading a story with a better ending. $700 deposited on the first of the month. Another $700 scheduled. The account name made me smile every time. Freedom Fund. I opened a new tab and searched flights, not because I needed an escape, but because I finally could go without negotiating it with anyone else. Iceland came up first. 3 nights, 4 days, solo, under $1,000 round trip. I'd always wanted to go, but there was always a reason to wait, save more, plan together, do it right. I realized waiting had been a habit built around someone else's comfort, not my own desire. I booked it. The confirmation email landed in my inbox, and I saved it to new chapters without thinking twice. He tried one more time after that. A long message, apologetic, reflective, full of words about growth and clarity that only arrived once his options were gone. He said he missed me. He said he missed our life. He said he understood now. I stared at the message longer than I needed to, not because I was tempted, but because I wanted to be precise. I replied once, calmly. "Our life was me providing stability while you prepared to leave with your ex. That's not something I miss. Take care." Then I blocked his number and felt the cleanest silence I'd felt in months. The group chat still invited me to things. Game nights, brunch, birthdays. No one asked about him anymore. Not because they were choosing sides, but because the story had ended. Plot resolved. Lesson learned. Josh came over one evening with beer, and we sat on the balcony watching the city lights come on one by one. "This place suits you," he said. I told him I knew. Later that night, I stood at the window alone, looking out over a city that felt wider than it ever had before. Somewhere across town, he was adjusting to a smaller life, learning what things cost when you can't outsource responsibility. And I wasn't angry about it. I wasn't vindictive. I was done. Consequences aren't revenge. They're just what happens when you stop carrying what was never yours to hold. By the time my flight date rolled around, it felt like the story had already closed itself. Not slammed shut, not torn apart, just finished. The way a book ends when the point has been made and there's nothing left to explain. I packed a small suitcase for Iceland, lighter than any trip I'd taken before, because I wasn't carrying anyone else's expectations with me. The airport felt different when I walked through it alone. Not lonely, just clean. No coordinating schedules, no checking in, no asking if now was the right time. I boarded the plane knowing every decision behind this moment was mine. While I was gone, the group chat stayed quiet in the way that means life is simply moving on. No updates about him, no drama, no sudden emergencies that required my emotional labor. When I landed back home, jet-lagged and content, my apartment greeted me the same way it always did now. Calm, bright, entirely mine. I unpacked slowly, put souvenirs on shelves I chose, and realized something subtle but important. I wasn't rebuilding. I was continuing. A week later, I deleted the last photo of us from my phone. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't stare at it long. I just recognized that it belonged to a version of my life that no longer needed documentation. The Freedom Fund crossed $5,000 that same week. I didn't celebrate with a purchase. I just smiled and closed the app because security feels better than any impulse ever did. I ran into Marissa once, unexpectedly, at a coffee shop near my office. She froze for half a second when she saw me, like she was deciding whether to pretend she didn't. I gave her a polite nod and stepped aside so she could order. She looked tired. Not guilty, not triumphant, just tired. When our eyes met again, she said my name softly, like it was a question. I nodded once and said hers. That was it. No confrontation, no satisfaction. Just the quiet understanding that whatever she thought she was stepping into back then had evaporated the moment consequences showed up. Friends stopped asking how I was doing because my answer stopped changing. I was good. Not fine, not okay, good. Work felt easier without the background hum of emotional negotiation. Evenings stretched instead of collapsed. Weekends belonged to me. I cooked when I wanted. I rested when I needed. I planned without checking anyone else's calendar. The absence of tension made room for things I hadn't realized I'd been postponing. One night, sitting on my balcony with a glass of wine, I replayed that moment at the bar one last time. The warning. The request to shrink. Don't embarrass me in front of my ex. It didn't sting anymore. It clarified. That sentence wasn't about embarrassment. It was about hierarchy, about where he placed me when it mattered. And the second I understood that, the ending was already written. Some people apologize when they lose what they took for granted. Others apologize because they lost the benefits. I learned the difference the moment I stopped providing the structure that kept his life comfortable. And I learned something else too. Walking away doesn't always require confrontation. Sometimes it just requires a decision made quietly, backed by facts, followed through without apology. I closed the balcony door, turned off the lights, and went to bed in a home that finally felt like a beginning instead of a compromise. No scene, just an ending that made room for everything that came after.